Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Monday, October 21st already, and we're here with this week's episode of Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia. As always, we are brought to you by Rogue Tulips, 501c Consulting and Association Management Services. Learn more about Rogue Tulips at our website, roguetulips.com. We are also big supporters of the 501c League, which is a virtual membership organization for everyone in the 501c community and the people who love them. You can check out the league at the 501cleague.net. The league's also offering an ethics course good for one CAE credit. So if you're getting your renewal process up for 2020, or you just need another hour to take the exam in May of next year, because the application deadline's already passed for the December test. So sorry, guys, you got to wait till May. So I am Cecilia Sepp. I am the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips, and I'm here with my co-host and friend, Agnes. Agnes, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Cecilia. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our global audience. My name is Agnes Amos Coleman. I'm an author and a consultant with Rogue Tulip. Over to you, Cecilia.
Great. Thanks, Agnes. So Agnes and I are excited about today's topic because our topic for today is inclusive approaches for global members. And we're going to take this from the perspective of the U.S. side of things. So U.S. associations and 501c organizations who have international members, because we only have 15 minutes, so we got to pick a way to go. So one of the things, one of the trends I think we've all seen in the 501c community is a lot of 501c organizations within the last 15, 20 years decided to go global to help grow their membership, which is a great idea. But then there are some different challenges that come along with that, because if you want to make sure everybody's having a good member experience, both US based and outside the US, then there's a lot of different things you have to take into consideration. One of the real basic ones is time zone management. One of the things that Agnes and I were talking about right before we hit the record button was how I was in Australia at the end of May, attending a conference, and I had to do a pitch call at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, Australia time, because back here in the US on the East Coast, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday. So I was calling from the future to the past. That's actually one of my favorite survey stories too, as I had to do a phone interview with a man in Australia. And I called him at 9 o'clock on Monday night, and it was 8 o'clock, I think 8 o'clock in the morning Tuesday there. It was very early in the morning, and he said he had trouble hearing me, and I said, because I'm calling from the past. And so he thought that was great. But that, just simple things like that. One of the other things, language. People may be fluent in English, but is it American English or British English? So, and there are variations. There's also different idioms in Canadian English. So somebody may be speaking English, but which English are they speaking? And you can't assume that they understand nuances of our reference points too. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that part of the
No,
discussion.
I think, Cecilia, I think you have it well said there, because definitely English is spoken and written differently across the globe, and it just depends on what kind of English you speak. You speak the Queen's English or you speak the American English. But really what's really important here, Cecilia, is particularly for our 501c community, that they really need to have strategies in place to deal with cultural challenges. And I think one of the high level areas that they probably need to consider here is developing an inclusive content that global members can find useful for their business environment.
Yeah.
Because we're in the business as an association of supporting our global members to do business in their own business environment. And we as a community definitely needs to start to look at that. How can we incorporate a lot of what we do within our content building to accommodate what you've already talked about, time zones, language barriers, currency. I mean, that's a key one when we have associations. So these are kind of a broad level area that association community really needs to look at if there's going to be this inclusion.
Yes, and because the basics are always important, I think. And to me, these are all the basics. It's like, can you talk to each other? Are you providing content that's valuable to them? Unless they're trying to learn about the US way of doing things, are you really providing, a physician or an attorney outside the US something useful that they can apply. The other thing is engagement. You know, we're all talking about engagement, right? And one of our partners, Gravitate Solutions, is often discussing engagement scoring, which they're very good at assisting clients with. But how are you engaging the international members? You know, how are they participating? Is it there is obviously going to be a lot of virtual because US members do a lot of virtual too, but are they able to access things easily because people have different systems outside the US? Are they able to get answers to their questions? Do people understand what their needs are? So there's a lot of different aspects of that, and I don't know if you want to add on to that
Thank you,
about engagement.
Cecilia. Yes, I think that was a very good point, raising the engagement issue. But the other side of that too, Cecilia, is that maybe it would be beneficial for all of us, at least in the 501 community, to engage them to provide an input on how we can best meet their needs.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, again, they are an association members because they want to learn how to do business better, or they want to enhance the way they're doing business in their country. So engaging them means getting feedback, getting input from them on how are things done in their country, and how can this conference or this association that they belong to help them get there. So that could be another side of engagement that they could definitely, our 501c community could be looking at when we're talking to our global members on how to be involved.
Well, and I think that this brings us also to inclusion. I think when you're talking engagement, you also have to talk inclusion because people have to feel welcome. And I think that it's just my opinion. I'm not saying that everybody's like this, but I think a lot of US associations reached out and decided to go global because they thought they could double or triple their membership with little effort. But for that person to have that kind of a good experience, and I think that we have addressed this a lot in the last, especially 10 years, in the US about trying to have that better experience. I know a lot of people in the US are going to other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Like recently, I saw several people, like Dean West from Association Laboratory, went to the India Conference for Associations and have traveled around. Agnes has a vast international experience. She's not originally from the US, and then she's lived in several other countries. And so she's worked in these other associations in other countries. And so I don't know if you want to expand on that, Agnes, but you had mentioned something about associations in other countries trying to serve a US person coming to their conference. They have to flip this thought process a little bit. So if you could expand on that, I think that would be great.
Thanks, Cecilia. I mean, we're talking about inclusion. We're talking about it holistically across the globe. So when we have association members coming here to the US to attend an event or to attend a conference, the same level of expectation that they have from us at the US to deliver and help them meet their education training needs is the same level of experience that we should expect when we go to either say Africa, India, or in Europe. So it has to be flipped. What are our needs? Is it technology needs that we need when we go to Europe to do a training, or when we go to Africa? Is it technology needs on how Africa or India or Europe does technology? Then needs to be taken into account. Is it political issues? One of the big areas here is that when we go to other countries, we need travel visas. That is a huge political issues that not one association can really manage outside of the political arena of their countries. So we really need to work within the framework of where we can handle it, either sending them a letter or sending us a letter to attend the events, but with the recognition that ultimately the government of the country is the one that's going to be deciding this factor. The other issue is regulatory and compliance, in the US as well as in the visiting country as well. So the global community, the 501c global community just really needs to look broadly, whether we're US based or Africa based or European based or Asia based, to look at how we can include our members in this whole holistic process.
Yes, and I think that bringing up the visas is, I was just doing a time check. Bringing up the visas is a great thing because I think most people in the US don't think about that for a lot of reasons. One, still a lot of people in the US don't really go outside of North America. And I'm
Mm.
going to say North America because, people go to Canada or they go to Mexico. And going to other countries for people in the US, though, a lot of us tend to go to Europe where we have agreements where all we need is a passport. We don't necessarily need a visa. But if you want to go to Australia from the US, you need a visa. So I had to get a visa in May when I went to Australia. Years ago, we went to St. Petersburg, Russia, and we had to go get a visa. And that was a really different process than getting one from Australia. I can tell you that. It was a lot stricter. It took a little longer. They had to have a photograph of us. It was a really big deal. We had to go to the Russian consulate here in Washington, D.C. So it was a bit of a process. Whereas now with Australia, and again, that was like 2003, I think, when we went there. But so it's maybe changed again. But like with Australia, it was easy. It's an online application. You fill it out, you pay your fee, and they attach it electronically to your U.S. passport. So when you check in at the airport, it's all fine. But not every country is like that. There's different treaties, there's different agreements. I know about a year ago, a lot of associations were concerned about the EU rules on data management and the right to be forgotten. The EU being the European Union. If you're not familiar with the European Union, they have a lot of different rules for these sorts of things. And as far as like data collection, there's different rules. We were all worried about being GDPR compliant a year ago. And you do have to comply with some of these rules. The right to be forgotten law was originally created for things like browsers like Google, but if you're collecting data on somebody and they ask you to delete it, you have to delete it. So
Mhm.
the right, those kind of laws in the EU are applicable to us as well. And even though we may not be fully aware of the implications of some of these laws, I don't know, Agnes, with your international experience, are we missing something that we should be reminding our audience of? Is there anything? We've talked about visas, we've talked about language, we've talked about, well, we haven't talked about cultural issues.
Well, I think we've pretty much covered it under that broad umbrella of really developing, whether we're a US-based association or European-based or global association for that matter, depending on the country that we represent. The strategy here is that we need to develop an inclusive content that our global members can find useful in the business environment, regardless of where they're operating from. And really providing, or engaging our local members, our global members, to take an active role in helping shaping the strategy of what that would look like, because that's really the key. Each country is different, but by engaging the global members to get involved, this will help us a long way to identifying what are the, areas that we need to be looking at and that we need to be addressing to make sure that our global membership is a very successful one.
Right.
The key of the reality is this, Cecilia, we have a lot more in common than we think as a global association. So we need to figure out what that commonality is, and we need to tap into that commonality so that we're all successful together.
I think that is great, a great thought to close on, because we do have more in common than we don't. Uh, we may not speak the same language or wear the same kind of clothes, but we're all basically humans trying to do better at our jobs. And
Exactly.
I think that's a great thing, the commonality. The only other thing I might mention, well, and it relates to commonality, is there are some cultural differences. Like we have different points of reference,
Mm-hmm.
which does relate to language as well, and in different histories, of course, but also just simple things like, what do colors mean? Colors mean different things in different countries. And so I would just suggest, in the spirit of that, that if you have people coming to your conference from other countries, read a little bit about that country and make sure you don't accidentally do something insulting.
Mhm.
because you're not trying to do the wrong thing, but you just may not be aware of it, and sometimes people are sensitive to these things. So I would just that would just be something I would recommend. That's something we've always done when we've gone to another country, is we've read about it. It just simple things like if you go to Japan and someone gives you their business card, they expect you to actually read it before you put it away. But in the
Mhm.
US, we're going, hey, yeah, give me your card, and we just put them in our pocket. But just simple things like that. But that comes back to this great idea you brought up, Agnes, of commonality, which I still want to close on that. The commonality is we want to connect
Yeah,
and we want to know each other. So
absolutely.
let's just be aware of that. Let's just find ways to keep all of our members engaged, no matter what country they're in. So, on that note, we will close for today. And we hope that if you are going global, you are already global. Or if you are one of our global audience members, that some of these points have been helpful and just reminded you of some of these things. It's just like being a good host or hostess
Hmm.
in your home. Just try to understand a little bit about what the people need and want and think. So that's it for today. Inclusive approaches for global membership, and we will be back next week with another topic. So see you then, everyone.